What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's Tarant tip, we're going to continue on with mixdowns. So I got 5 more mixdown tips for you. This is part 3. And if you haven't seen part 2 or 1, go check those out. Although part 1 is super old, and you could tell by the studio setup and just how I am present on the camera and talking. I wasn't I was just doing it to do it. I wasn't too sure of what would come of it, but you guys seem to be liking what I've been doing, so I've been keeping up with the videos and getting new topics and stuff. So if you have anything you want to learn or any questions, comment them down below, and I'll be sure to try to make a video explaining that for not only for you, but for anyone else who will potentially have that question. So ask away. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Maybe. I don't know. I also want to real quick let you guys know that we are on Patreon now. There's a lot of cool perks for you guys, but ultimately the reason why we started on Patreon is because we really wanted this to be for music producers by music producers, I didn't want to go out searching for sponsor ads and products. I would rather, give you guys what you want, and in return it's a self-feeding community. You get what you put in, and or you get out what you put in. So I would love to see you guys over on Patreon. Again, we do song feedback, we do mastering, we do live streams and all that cool stuff. But anyways, back to the 5 tips. So tip number 1 is going to be the 10 dB rule, and that's like adding 10 dB or taking off 10 dB is basically halving the volume. And I don't mean like the actual volume, because obviously, if 70 is all the way down, then half of that would be half the sound, right? Well, it's the perceived loudness. So let's do a little demo on this sound right now. Or let's just do the whole track. I'm going to turn this up a bit, and I'm going to turn this down 10 dB, and then we'll see what halving the sound is. The perceived loudness sound. So if you know you want to half the perceived loudness, -10, or if you want to double it, add 10, and you will either get double or half the perceived loudness. So that's a quick little tool to get you in your mixdowns, get you headed in the right direction quicker. Tip number 2 is it is okay to clip. Like, you want to clip to catch the peaks, but you don't want to clip to just flatten it out. So look, let's demo it on this loop, and then we'll do it on the bass too. But so look. You could barely notice that it's actually clipping anything. And what this is doing, before it felt like the top loop was on top of all the drums. Now that the peaks are kind of tamed down a little bit with the, they're either behind the kick and snare now, or they're more flat response with the kick and snare. It feels like they're getting tucked back now, but all we're doing is just literally catching the peaks. So, that's perfectly okay to clip like that. Then if you go to the bass, let's do a limiter 2 and show you good and bad limiting. So about right there is where I would stop, and it's catching the peaks for me. I don't want to squash the sound. I just want to keep it more consistent and not have those peaks really stand out. So that's why I set that up around there. Now here's bad limiting. So let me do 2 of those. One with this. All right, so here's good limiting. So you see it's catching all the peaks, and some are, clipping a little more than others. That's the way I look at it. I try to look for like that quieter peak and just barely clip, and then all the other ones will get caught. And that will start leveling my sound out without being too dramatic. But, what I hear a lot about rhythm music or dubstep or whatever you want to label the subgenres of that, just over compressed, over limited, saturated bass music. Because let's be fair, it's not just dubstep and rhythm. I hear it across all genres. So that's good limiting. Here's bad limiting. The sound could breathe, it's doing its thing, whereas this is just flat. You start hearing the distorted low mids come through, and it just squashed the sound and did not sound good. So that is what they mean when you don't limit, don't crush the limiter. That's crushing the limiter. But if you're using a limiter to catch the peaks, that's what it's for. So be smart when limiting. Just catch the peaks to keep your sound more consistent. Don't do it to really just squash your sound. I don't know. Just listen. You'll know when you hear the distortion coming in. Just try to limit, catch the peaks without changing the sound too much. That's really all I'm looking for when I limit. Next, I kind of talked about this in I think part 1 with the kick and snare being mono, but let's just go into it because you don't necessarily always want it mono. So I have these weird chains on my drums and stuff, so most of the time I change them or take them off. But I have a mono bass thing where I could change the frequency and stuff, but it monos it out. So you want the kick smack dab in the middle. If you want some stereo on it, maybe you layer it with like a hi-hat or something. Next is the snare. This is my snare. I usually just overcompress, oversaturate, all that stuff, because I like when it just like smacks you and it's grungy and so all that compressor is squashing my sound out a bit. But so if you go to the utility, I have it at 100 right now. But if you start to dial it back and have it sitting more in the middle, you see it's still basically the same volume. You do lose a little bit of that from that stereo width, a little sparkle. But if you get your snare and kick going in the middle, now that bass, it really feels like it's filling out the speakers on the side. So you really want those kick and snares in the middle, making sure that they're driving the beat, whereas everything else you could kind of sparkle around the speakers. And again, sub, you want mono too. So just think about that. Kick, snare, you want in the middle, driving the beat, and as well as the sub, you kind of want that in the middle and under the song. And that is how you do it by putting it mono. Now, one of my favorite little cheat codes or whatnot of CPU is the Sidechain trigger. And what it is I just have analog white noise, and I have on the amp a nice little tick. So it's just like tick. But that's off. And that's going to the sidechain. And now we have the sidechain set up. And then we could go sends only and pitch that out. So now we have that channel routing to the sidechain. And then we could send the top loop too. And if you listen, it doesn't really click and all that stuff. You know, when you start doing sidechain on multiple channels, you get those clicking and the popping, and it just doesn't sound that good. Well, that's your CPU kind of freaking out. So if you send it all to this send, now you could individually choose each channel that you want to the sidechain, and then this reroutes back into the master. So the song all comes together still in your master. Now the last Mixdown mastering tip thing for you would be to low cut your master. And the safe way, just slap on ×4 at 30. But really, if you look, it's a B, C, C sharp, D. So most of the time, the lowest bass note is going to be like a D. So it depends on your song. So don't just do this because I said it. You basically could get away with closing up the sub a little more, which would give you more room for the highs and stuff, which would give you a louder mix, because those sub frequencies, the louder they are and the more of them, the rest of the high end frequencies that make it seem louder are going to drown out a little bit. So you're going to have to crank it up a little bit to make it seem loud. But if you do this, it frees up the room down here. It doesn't look like much, but it does, because this is all like that super muddy stuff that it's either playing or it's not. And if it's trying to make the speaker play it, it's just sending information that it doesn't really need necessarily. So you could close that in and make sure it's not playing anything lower than your fundamental bass notes. So that's something to look in. I know some people I heard go up to like 40, and some just keep it at 30. So again, just turn 30 on right away, and you already notice a little cleaner, more, I guess it gets you, the way to explain it would get your tight end just becomes a little tighter, and it doesn't seem like so soft. It gets a little more punch and stuff when you do that, because it's able to breathe and, come to life like it should be. But anyways, those are my 5 mixdown / mastering tips. I know they kind of just go hand in hand now. The lines have been blurred. But if you use these tips plus the tips in part 2 and the tips in part 1, you're off to a very good start, and your mixdowns will be listenable. They'll be good, and it's only a matter of time of messing around and trial and error before your mixdowns and masters become great. Again, I've been at it for 7 years, learning and experimenting, and then stumbling upon methods that I learned from something else and trying to adapt them to my style and this and that, and comboing tips, and it's a never-ending learning process, and every genre is different. So I encourage you to not only master and mix down music that you make, but try to do all different genres. I know the music I produce is like higher energy electronic music, but I've over the 7 years produced about everything. I did some chill music, I did some house music, I did instrumentals, trap, I did boom bap. I even did music I don't even know what it's considered, I even tried playing guitar and sampling some drums and stuff and making a song out of real instruments. And it's good to be versatile and just mess around across everything. Not even though it's not necessarily what you want to be known as, it's still good to get the practice, and then you could take tips that you learn from those genres and mash them into yours, and you'll become even more unique. So again, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Click that thumbs up. It helps us out and lets us know you like the content we're putting out. If you have any questions about mixing or mastering, give us a comment and we'll be sure to answer that and possibly make a video for that question in the future. As always, thanks for watching. I'd hope to see you at the community on Patreon. Link in the description. Peace.